Hey guys, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan, obviously, and I haven't posted in a while, but so for the year 2021, we decided to take take a crack at the endurance series. So as you can see, we're on R2D Twin. Currently, we are fifth out of, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 teams, something like that. We've had a couple strong finishes, but this last go around we had a bit of a motor problem. So you can see there's oil and water, and so we haven't dropped the motor yet, but what we think happened is that there was a puncture in the radiator, which then caused the bike to overheat, caused the motor to fail. So we're going to try to drop the motor. Even just preliminarily speaking, you can see some damage. Obviously, you can't tell there, but the rear cylinder is cracked at a minimum. So figure we got to drop the motor and fix it, and might as well give you a little tutorial on how to do it. So for step one, I'd like to start just taking the rear wheel off. I know this might be different. I've taken other SV wheels off on other SVs, and sometimes need more than one tool, but for now, usually just use a crescent wrench. It's easiest. You can obviously use a socket and an impact, but I don't know. It's just easier with a crescent wrench. So just loosen this guy up. I like to wear gloves in this because it gets super dirty. Alright, then push the axle through. I don't say a pro tip, but something that'll help. If you put your feet under the wheel, it makes it significantly easier to pull off. I know some people use the pit bull wedges and whatnot, but I find it easier with the feet. Push through. Push the wheel forward a little bit to get some slack on the chain. Lock the chain off. And then lock the wheel out. Simple as that. Doesn't take more than 15 seconds. So the purpose of this is that we'll eventually have to take off the front sprocket. Depending on when you want to go, but I just like to start here, and yeah, simple. A couple other things you want to do for preparation. If you're not good with organization, make sure you put all your bolts in little baggies, little sandwich baggies, and you can label them as well. It helps you to not lose any bolts, two, know what they came off of and where to put them back, and three, it just helps with organization of the whole thing. So if you've done this a few times or whatnot, generally I take a baking pan. You can buy them at Target, Walmart, whatever. They're cheap, and I like to put all my stuff on there. Just keeps everything together. Cluttered, because once you start pulling bolts and whatnot, everything starts rolling around, and it's just easier to keep everything in one place. All right. So after you remove the rear wheel, say step two, drain the oil. Full disclosure, I've already drained it just to see if there's any internal motor shavings or whatever, but I'll still walk you through it. So generally speaking, you're gonna need, for stock oil drain bolts, you're gonna need a 14mm socket, but I have a titanium one that's already pre-drilled from Sam Weist at LWT Racing. If you don't already have one, I highly suggest you get one. Really light, bolts are already pre-drilled, so that requires a 17mm. So we'll just go through the motions for everybody out there, just for everything to be complete. So when draining the oil, you want to make sure you first undo the oil fill cap, which is right here on the clutch side of the SV. Make sure you do that. Allow the airs to get in and allows it to drain properly. So let's see, remove that. You just pretty much drop it on the floor. Come back over here and loosen up the drain. Like I said, I had it previously drained, but still going through the motions for you. So this, you know, so if you have to move this around, oil and stuff's not gonna go crazy everywhere. But also, make sure you have a bunch of paper towels handy. So while it's still draining, you want to make sure we're gonna move over to the oil filter, which is right on the front, right here. So we're gonna need a flathead screwdriver to remove this little collar thing. I forget what they're called at the moment, but for racing we need them to be safety wired. We need the oil filters to be safety wired on. So just loosen this guy up, just like that. So this holds the oil filter on. If you know it would come loose by vibrations, or you tighten it enough. Also seen a couple methods of removing these. I've also done a few myself. One, you know, if you can get it off by hand, great. If you can't, well, there are these cool things that you can pick up at a store. It fits a motorcycle oil filter and just ratchets on here, and you can turn it off. But luckily, this one is able to turn by hand. So make sure you move your oil drain open and let it drain. Like I said, make sure you have paper towels handy because it generally gets fairly messy. Whoop. Just, you know, let that drain out. Make sure you get all the old oil out. Let that drain for a little bit. So once most of the oil is drained out, I like to put the oil filter back on. This is just for dropping the motor. When we get into the season, I generally change the oil between each round, just because we'll put anywhere from 100 to 200 laps on the bike. So it goes through its paces during a race. But I just like to put this back on so it helps keep the oil from dripping out of the motor, because there is still oil in the motor. Like if you go to take off a starter, there's stuff that still comes out. So I just like to put that in there, keeps things from dripping around. So install that, just back on, hand tight. You don't need to re-safety wire it. It's coming out anyhow. Reinstall the drain plug over here. How if I turned it the right way? Just snug it up a smidgen. Just hold on. And then put the oil fill cap back on the other side. I don't know if you can tell, but there is some white sediment at the bottom of the oil after I drained it into the oil thing. So that means that we've had, might be tough to tell here, that we've had oil and water mix. Sometimes it comes from a head gasket head blown, so the water mixed with the oil. There are a variety of reasons why that could happen, but I know that we have a cracked cylinder, and I don't know how much that has to play in that. So there are also tiny little metal slivers, almost like iron shards, kind of like you see with magnets. A bunch of those on the end of the drain plug. So we got something going on in there, and take the motor out to get it fixed. following the oil drain, make sure you clean out your container. Generally, I dump it into an oil drain and then use some kind of brake cleaner and then wipe it all out in there, so prevents cross-contamination, but it just helps keep things cleaner. So moving on to the next step, we got to drain the water out of everything. I had also done some of this at the track, but kind of fill it up just to see what kind of problems we were having. So generally we want to take this right here is the water drain, or the water pump drain. So it's a 10mm socket, if you can find it. Take here and loosen it. Before you do that, might I say, make sure you take the radiator cap off first. And so loosen it up. The water's going to shoot out pretty good, so make sure you have the pan a little higher up to catch it all. Set this aside real quick. Another way that it's popular is to loosen up the hoses and make sure the extra water drains out of there, because when you start moving everything around, not all the water's out of the radiator. So do this, dump the extra water and move on. So depending on what kind of clamps you have, hose clamps you have. This one's a Phillips head, so just remove this. It loosens the hose clamp. Twist it around a little bit, get it loose, and watch the extra water dump out. And help avoid messes later on. As much as you can, really. Put that back on. Tighten her up. And this basically drains most of the water out of the system. You'll probably still have some, but for purposes of dropping the motor or whatnot. And then reinstall the radiator drain cap. That's that. Alright, moving on next, we're going to have to start taking things off, get under the tank so we can start undoing a whole bunch of stuff. This next thing is just to take your seat off, so we can get to the tank and remove that. The bolt size will vary. I got some Allen ones, 5mm Allen, so take this off real quick. Make sure you set these on your tray so you don't forget them. Or, easier, better yet, just take your seat off, just put them back where they came from. That way you can't mess it up, really. Next thing we're going to do is take off the tank. So, at least for me, on this bike, I've got 10mm bolts, so you'll take these two off down here. You regular FB guys won't have to worry about this this valve, but I need to remove that as well, so we can put the tank off and see what's on underneath so we can get it. You can drop your stuff like an idiot. That works too. For those of you that have tank spacers, you can see right here, make sure that you keep these bolts and tank spacers together because they'll slide under here and then go on a nice fishing expedition for them. So, there's this. I'm going to set this down so it's a little difficult with one hand. Set this aside. So coming in here, pull these. Now watch for the spacers. So I'm gonna slide them out just one by one. Make sure you keep hold of them so they don't disappear into your motor somewhere. Just set this down there. So next thing, now that we have the seat off, we can lift the tank and disconnect the fuel line and hoses underneath. So what I lost the thing that props up the tank a long time ago. So what I use is a crowbar. Works great. So just lift this puppy up. Nope. Just prop it up in the middle of the triple in the hole. You other regular SV guys, this is a Gixxer. I think they're pretty much any year a Gixxer nut right here. Otherwise, you guys will have a rounded nut. So I think your general tank prop goes in one of these holes here. Could be wrong on that, but just saying. So yeah, prop it up here, underneath here, and then gotta undo a couple of these things. So let me set this down and maybe. So what we have here is this is the fuel pump. Fuel pump connection. So let me remove this real quick. I'm gonna have to set the GoPro down. Disconnect that. So this on the 03 through, I don't know, 05, 06, these plugs are white. Go to the wiring harness. On the 07 plus, which is on the sprint bike over there, they are brown. So just as a quick FYI. So once that's unplugged, you want to make sure you get this fuel line running here too. I'm gonna set this down so we can get that as well. Shine a little light in there for you. So as you can tell, here is the fuel pump plug. Then this is the fuel line up here. Difficult to see right here. So what you need to do is pinch these gray tabs together and this black clip will pull out. So it can absolutely be a pain in the ass. Just pull that out. You'll probably get a little gas dripping out as you saw, but that's fine. So yeah, there's your fuel line. You got to do that. And lastly, to take the tank off, we got to take this 10mm tank bolt off right here that it hinges on. So we'll get a long 10mm and take that out. Now, before we take this whole thing out, we might be able to remove the tank prop. So we can just lift the tank straight off. Now it's loose. Go back underneath here. It'll be in between the frame and the subframe. Set this down real quick. Alright, so once we got this out, you're going to need a log extension for it. Just pull this out. And then lift the tank off. And set it aside. And just like that, your tank's off. Now we're on the underside of the tank and let's start removing other things. Alright, now we're moving on to the stuff that might be intimidating. It certainly was for me the first time. First time I dropped the motor probably took me, I don't know, half a day and 2 people, but it's a learning experience. So we're gonna start getting a bunch of these plugs here and here. What I would do for starters is when you remove the plug, you can tape it, you can write on it with a marker. So for instance, this plug comes out of this, these two come out of there for the airbox, so you might put a piece of tape over it and label it as 1. So when you're putting everything back together that the one plug goes with the one thing that it plugs into. So it'd be 1 and 1, they go together. That's a quick, easy way of keeping track of everything, because once everything drops out, you'll be staring at this thing like, why do I have 50 plug-ins and 49 places to plug them in? Because you're probably missing a place. So definitely mark down what plugs into what. It'll help ease the stress of trying to figure out, where everything goes on the wiring harness. Next, we're gonna remove the airbox. So to remove the airbox sits on top of the throttle bodies, which are these things. There are 2 hose clamps. There's one on the front, or there's one on the rear, which I'm unscrewing now. And then there's one on the front that's more difficult to get to. I would suggest if you have a longer Phillips head screwdriver, to go for it. So it might be tough to see on here, but it's in between this hose, whatever this thing is, in here, and you can see it just right there. So you need to loosen both of those up to be able to take the airbox off of the throttle bodies, or else you'd be pulling all day and nothing will come off. So we'll loosen those puppies up. Alright, so now that we've loosened those up, we can concentrate on unplugging everything from the airbox. So different year airboxes have different plugs, they vary, but make sure you just unplug everything. There'll also be some like blowback hoses that go down into the motor. There's going to be a couple of those attached. But once you get these collars loosened up, you can lift the box off. It just comes right off, and see what you have to remove. So we'll remove these hoses here, hoses here. Remove that. And just like that, remove this last one right over here. Just like that, airbox is off. So you can set it aside somewhere. Pretty easy, I just set them in a pile over there. So once we got the airbox moved aside over there, now we continue on the process of unplugging things. So things will vary between the 03 and 06 and 07 SVs. For instance, you'll have a single plug on the 03 through 06. So we can pull those over here. Single plug, whereas that has a dual plug. That's the Superbike for sprint racing, which is still out of order, but we're getting it figured out. So yeah, we're gonna pull the front coil, the rear coil, make sure everything's unplugged. We're also going to take off the throttle bodies, which, similar to the airbox, have these clamps right here, and you can see my finger right here. So we're going to loosen those up. Some people like to completely remove the throttle bodies. I personally don't. Just like to move them aside because I hate dealing with throttle cables and getting those things back together. So I try to keep that all together in one little piece. So yeah. So now that I got that, all you got to do is like loosen these, loosen their collars, and then a shake back inside, and then eventually it pulls out into, you know, this one big clunk of throttle body. I like to zip tie this to the side of the frame so it keeps it out of the way, and you know, I don't got to take everything off. So we'll do that real quick. So I just took a really long zip tie, zip tied it through there, so the throttle body's now just chilling to the side. There's a couple other plugs that you need to get while you're in here. Make sure you get the water pump plug, or the thermostat. Helps read the water temperature. So see, get this puppy out. It's there. I think that might be about it from the top side. We'll get to more as we get further into the motor. All right, now that we've got everything unbuttoned from the inside for the most part, now moving on to everybody's least favorite one, which is the exhaust removal. It's a real pain in the ass. So we got a couple bolts here on the front header. We gotta remove the springs, gotta remove this guy that helps support it. Gotta remove it on the rear cylinder. Yeah, it's back here on the header. And then gotta remove this as well. So enjoy watching me struggle. A couple quick things before I pull my hair out over this. A couple of tools that might really help you with these springs that are here and up here. I have this, I don't know if you call it a spring puller from Pit Posse. Works great. You just hook it and pull it, and the spring comes right off. Also, these header bolts will probably be pretty tight, pretty stuck, so make sure you be careful. Probably help with some PB Blaster or some kind of penetrating oil so that you don't strip the bolts, and that becomes a whole other nightmare. Also, some of them might be hard. This tool might be the best thing that I've ever had. It's a telescopic ratchet with the flex head on it. So it works fantastic. It's only 20 bucks from Stanley, I do believe. But it's amazing, so you get way more leverage and bolts become less difficult. So just a quick word. The rear exhaust, you don't have to take the header off the back of the cylinder, as you'll see here in a minute or two. See that there's a header that comes off the back of the cylinder, but then the exhaust attaches to the back of that. There's a clamp right there that you need to remove, so you don't have to remove the whole thing. So what I do is I put a couple extensions on and back it off from out here. So now that we have all the bolts removed from front headers, the middle, the back mounting, and loosened up that guy back there. It's going to take a certain amount of patience and shaking. I honestly haven't figured out how to do it quickly. So it's going to take, you know, some wobbling, some shaking, some making loose. Might need a, you know, a mallet or something to tap things out. But yeah, it's everybody's least favorite part. Whew. I can tell that was a doozy. Got it apart. Found that taking off the front header makes things easier to shake off. Also, out of that thing. Also, little WD-40 never hurts. Just beware that when you put the motor back in and start your bike back up, some of that will still be left in the headers and probably smoke out a little bit, but don't freak out. Alright, so after we got the exhaust removed, we'll move back over to the stator side. And we got to remove some of this stuff in here so that kind of getting the final prep to pull the motor. So a couple things on this side. We got to remove the shifting arm down here. We got to remove the clutch actuator, worm, adjuster, whatever you want to call it. We have to remove the clutch cable. We also have to remove the front sprocket. So a couple things. Prior to taking off the shift arm, you want to make sure that you mark where on the shaft and the shift arm your old settings were at. So when you go to put it back on, it can be close to, or be exactly what you left it with. It can just easily be achieved by using a Sharpie. So just kind of draw some there, draw a mark there, and then when you put it back on, those marks line up. You're going to have the same shifting height and whatever that you've had before. Another tip, when you pull this off, make sure you have some duct tape, because these are spring loaded and there's also little bearings, little balls in this actuator, and if they come out and they go everywhere, then you're kind of SOL if you can't find them all. So you'll see me do that. When I pull this off, I'm going to tape both bolts into these holes. You'll see when I pull it off. We'll tape them together just to keep everything together. And then also, you might probably take a picture of your clutch adjustment if you, I'm assuming you like where it's at before. So if you're going to want that same setting, probably take a picture so you can get relatively close to where you were before. Also, onto the front sprocket, you're going to need this. This is going to be a mofo for those of you who haven't changed the front sprocket or this hasn't come off yet. You can do it with generally with a breaker bar and a 32 millimeter socket, impact socket, or if you don't want to mess around, which I generally don't, I have a 1/2 inch impact. Takes quick work of it, or makes quick work of it, I should say. But this is definitely gonna be hard, so make sure you spray this with penetrating oil. Probably let it sit, because this will be difficult for a lot of people who haven't already removed it. So, like I said, 32 millimeter, it's a big boy. Ironically, it's the same for the top triple, but regardless. So those are some hints, and you'll see me take it off. So I just unscrew this guy. Just like take it all the way off for ease. And then this slides in and out. They're a bunch of little splines. Probably tough to tell in this, but they're a bunch of little slides. Just slides right off, just like that. And then I generally replace the bolt back in it so I don't lose it. If there's one thing you remember through this whole thing, it's make sure you keep track of your bolts. Replace the bolts. For instance, you know, we did for the tank and basically anything else we've taken off the tank, the exhaust. Replace the bolts back in the holes. It'll just make life way easier. Alright, moving on to the worm actuator, clutch adjuster, whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't know. That's to everybody's own little thing. I do want to say, taking this off before the clutch cable is makes it a lot easier to remove this out of, I guess, slide this up out of this little holder here if you take this off first. So try to take this off in like an even manner so we don't get anything that like springs too much. See, there's a spring here, and we'll see here in a sec. And so, as you can tell, the holes need to line up. So you'll see this is the little bearings are inside of here. And if it all comes apart, then you're chasing these little balls. Take that joke as you will. But just to avoid that, I put the screws back in here, like so. And then I'll tear off a piece of duct tape and tape these two so it just holds everything together. And just tape this screw together so it, etc., just holds everything together. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to work. Ooh, chew up there. All right, so next, these are all removed with 10 millimeters. The clutch worm adjuster deal, the shift arm, 10 millimeter bolts. Your clutch adjusting here will be, I think they vary. Generally, the SV clutch pull is pretty hard, so we generally swap it out with a Motion Pro. You have to look up the part number. I don't know it off the top of my head, but Zoran at TWF Racing sells them as well. Nice guy. So support small business and twin stuff, and yeah, good thing. So we loosen up this bottom one because we're going to need to slide this up and out. So when we drop the motor, the clutch cable isn't still attached. Need to remove this. So a little pro tip: there's a tiny little metal ledge that comes out of this. I've previously bent it back because it's such a pain in the ass to try to fish this line through it. So I just kind of pushed it back, and it just makes removal of this whole thing easy. So you just kind of lift up and out, and there you go. Make sure you put it aside on your tray so you don't lose anything. Remove this nut off the bottom here, and then just slide it up and out. And voila, there's your clutch cable. It's out. Just like that. Lastly, we need to take this front sprocket off. So if you see from the removal of the wheel, the chain's on the outside of the swing arm. To get the chain off easy, because there's not a lot of space in here, put the chain on the inside of the swing arm, like so, and angle it so that it's almost diagonal. You'll see here, I'm angling it this way, so it'll have a cleaner removal from the front sprocket. This bolt's going to be on tight, so you're going to need to hold the chain to keep the front sprocket from spinning. So what I do is I literally put my foot on the chain, so it doesn't spin whenever I go to take this puppy off. And then back it off, just like that. Front comes off. So there's also a back washer that you need to remove. Next, we will take the chain off again. Definitely wear gloves on this because it's greasy as shit. So like I said, put this diagonally over here, like so. Diagonally, and then it'll be much easier removal of the chain. Just like that, folds back in there, and then the front sprocket slides right out. Now this puppy's gonna need replaced. Kind of butchered it last round, couple rounds. So yeah, there's that. And one thing I forgot to mention, so you know how we had to make sure we get the ground on the right side of the bike. Well, on the left side, there are these guys that run up through the tail and connect right here on the side. So we gotta unplug these, and then the motor will be good to drop. So we'll feed these two that we just unplugged from right here. Feed these underneath. Feed these through here so they don't pull on anything. So now it'll be ready to be dropped straight through. Lastly, we'll just take the hoses off of the radiator. So we'll take this guy off, and also we'll take this guy off, and we should be getting close to ready to drop it. Alright, so now that we have the hoses, make sure you put towels in them, because as you see there's already water dripping, so obviously we didn't get all the water the first time. So put hoses in the end of those. Make sure you put these in your intake too, so people don't, or shit doesn't get in your motor. Not that it matters, because mine's toast. Alright, so anyhow, moving on to pretty much the second to last step before dropping it. Take the engine bolts out. Alright, back to where we were. So there would be 6 engine bolts. Depending on how they're bolted in. My sprint bike's different than this guy. There's generally 3 per side. So there's one here, one here, one here. There's one in the middle also, and then there's the same on the opposite side. So kind of like a pro tip. The first time I did this, I didn't really know which bolt went where. So I came up with this little cardboard cutout thing, labeled left and right side. So then every time I pulled a bolt, so say I pulled that one on the left side, I would stick it in this hole here. Here, pull the next bolt, stick it in the next hole, pull the third bolt, stick it in the third hole. So I would know when I go to put it back in, what bolt corresponds to what hole. So I definitely suggest you do that. All these smaller bolts down here, and same on the other side, are 14mm sockets, whereas this big guy in the middle is going to be a 17. So we're going to loosen those up, and we'll go from there. Once we remove the stuff on the stator side of things, there's a couple things you want to make sure you take off before dropping the motor. You want to take off the electric from the starter. Also, there's a secret little bastard back here. It's hard to see, but there's a ground that goes to the battery. Now this baby, really easy to miss because it's all the way in the back. That'll be an 8mm, but you need to take that off, or else it'll cause your whole motor to be lopsided when you drop it. The good news is it's got the tensile strength of, I don't even know what you want to compare it to, because it will hold the motor up, I promise. But you want to make sure you take that off, and don't forget it, because it's hiding back here. So take off that, and we'll do that real quick, and then we'll get to dropping the motor. So like I said, you're going to need, for this ground, I need an 8mm on an extension because it's sitting way back there. Let me just get this out real quick. It's really tough to see, but it's this guy right here. I hope you can see me. The other thing is to take this off of the starter right here. So I think that's a 10mm wrench. It should just be real easy to get off. Yep, so we'll take that off real quick. So now that we got this guy removed off the starter, we're gonna start taking these bolts out. Here, 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 and here on the left side. And then there's three on the other side, on this side. Bottom line, this bolt needs to come out last. This main guy, he'll be the last bolt you pull to make sure everything drops. So we're gonna zip off these bolts, put them in our little cardboard cutout so we don't lose anything, and we'll go from there. Now, some of you might be asking about these things. I usually loosen these up while I can. You know, I just spin them out as much as I can. Really, try to pull it out a little bit just so the motor has more room to drop. But you also might be wondering about why I don't have any castle nuts on here, here, or down here. Reason being, they're a real pain in the ass. Don't really serve much of a purpose. Generally, you'd have to buy a special tool, and I think they're all different sizes, so you'd have to buy like 3 different spanner sockets to get off, which is a real pain in the ass. So a way to get around that the first time I did this is that I took a flat punch and a hammer, and basically just tapped it. It's a soft aluminum, so you know, use a screwdriver like a flathead at your own risk. But I have a punch with like a flat bottom, so I would use that and tap it around into a circle until it got loose enough where I could do it by hand. That's kind of the way around that, and then I just never reinstalled them, and I haven't had spanner nuts on any of my bikes for, I don't know, at least 4 years now. So just a little tip for those of you that still have the spanner nuts on, whatever you call these things. I have no idea. Alright, so we've gotten everything off, everything unbolted and whatnot. So I would say go do another once through. Make sure you're not missing anything that can get caught up, anything that's connected to the engine, the motor. You know, make sure all the plugs are off, because now we're moving on to the last step, which is to drop the engine. Definitely, if you have 2 people, it makes it so much easier. 1 person, it can be tricky. But definitely try to get 2 people. Definitely gonna need a jack. I use this jack. Some people use like the ATV MX jacks. I don't know, this is all I have, so this is what I've been using. So the idea is we're going to jack this up on the bottom of the oil pan up here. And then once we get that propped up a little bit, we're going to be able to slide out this very last bolt and hopefully gently bring it down. And then from there, hopefully you have a motor stand, something to put it on, something to put it against, and then we should be good to go. So hopefully this goes fairly simple. So you jack it up to support the bottom of it. Support the bottom of the bike, and then once there's some weight off, you'll be able to hopefully push out the bolt. Jack it up, and it helps to try to rotate the bolt on the other side to get it out. Get a little stuck. I seem to be caught on something here. Get back to you. Alright, well, we're back. Well, I don't know. Probably a couple hours later. So this guy tightened this in and I didn't have the correct socket. So this guy is a 23 millimeter. Make sure you get the 6.1. These guys are, and the one up here that I took out, these are 19 millimeter, just as an FYI. On the sprint bike, I haven't really had a problem since I've been able to turn them in by hand, but this last guy I put it in by socket. So got the socket from my boy Simon, and we'll take it out and finish this puppy up. So make sure there's enough tension on the bottom of this thing. Keep it up. Get the puppy out. And now, at last, finally able to drop the motor forward. Just make sure it goes slow. Looks like we're caught in something. Oh, just a little jiggle. Just caught on the side. Just take it slow. Take it slow to the ground. Out it comes, just like that.